All right, this is chapter 8, and we're beginning on page 104. At the entrance to the camp, SS officers were waiting for us. We were counted. Then we were directed to the Appelplatz. The orders were given over the loudspeakers. Form ranks of fives, groups of 100. 5 steps forward. I tightened my grips on my father's hand. The old familiar fear, not to lose him. Very close to us stood the tall chimney of the crematorium's furnace. It no longer impressed us. It barely drew our attention. A veteran of Buchenwald told us that we would be taking a shower and afterward be sent to different blocks. The idea of a hot shower fascinated me. My father didn't say a word. He was breathing heavily beside me. "Father," I said, "just another moment. Soon we'll be able to lie down. You'll be able to rest." He didn't answer. I myself was so weary that his silence left me indifferent. My only wish was to take the shower as soon as possible and lie down on a cot. Only it wasn't easy to reach the showers. Hundreds of prisoners crowded the area. The guards seemed unable to restore order. They were lashing out, left and right, to no avail. Some prisoners who didn't have the strength to jostle or even to stand sat down in the snow. My father wanted to do the same. He was moaning, "I can't anymore. It's over. I shall die right here." He dragged me toward a pile of snow from which protruded human shapes, torn blankets. "Leave me," he said. "I can't go on anymore. Have pity on me. I'll wait here until we can go into the showers. You'll come and get me." I could have screamed in anger. To have lived and endured so much, was I going to let my father die now? Now that we would be able to take a good hot shower and lie down? "Father," I howled, "Father, get up right now. You will kill yourself." And I grabbed his arm. He continued to moan. "Don't yell, my son. Have pity on your old father. Let me rest here a little. I beg of you. I'm so tired. No more strength." He had become childlike, weak, frightened, vulnerable. "Father," I said, "you cannot stay here." I pointed to the corpses around him. They too had wanted to rest here. "I see, my son. I do see them. Let them sleep. They haven't closed an eye for so long. They're exhausted. His voice was tender. I howled into the wind. "They're dead. They will never wake up. Never. Do you understand?" This discussion continued for some time. I knew that I was no longer arguing with him, but with death itself, with death that had already chosen. The sirens began to wail. Alert. The lights went out in the entire camp. The guards chased us toward the blocks. In a flash, there was no one left outside. We were only too glad not to have to stay outside any longer in the freezing wind. We let ourselves sink into the floor. The cauldrons at the entrance found no takers. There were several tiers of bunks. To sleep was all that mattered. When I woke up, it was daylight. That is when I remembered that I had a father. During the alert, I had followed the mob, not taking care of him. I knew he was running out of strength, close to death, and yet I had abandoned him. I went to look for him. Yet at the same time, a thought crept into my mind. If only I didn't find him. If only I were relieved of this responsibility. I could use all my strength to fight for my own survival, to take care of my own self. Instantly, I felt ashamed of myself forever. I walked for hours without finding him. Then I came to a block where they were distributing black coffee. People stood in line, quarreled. A plaintive voice came from behind me. "Eliezer, my son, bring me a little coffee." I ran toward him. "Father, I have been looking for you for so long. Where were you? Did you sleep? How are you feeling?" He seemed to be burning with fever. I fought my way to the coffee cauldron like a wild beast, and I succeeded in bringing back a cup. I took one gulp. The rest was for him. I shall never forget the gratitude that shone in his eyes when he swallowed this beverage, the gratitude of a wounded animal. With these mouthfuls of hot water, I had probably given him more satisfaction than during my entire childhood. He was lying on the boards, ashen, his lips pale and dry, shivering. I couldn't stay with him any longer. We had been ordered to go outside to allow for cleaning of the blocks. Only the sick could remain inside. We stayed outside for 5 hours. We were given soup. When they allowed us to return to the blocks, I rushed toward my father. "Did you eat?" "No." "Why?" They didn't give us anything. They said that we were sick, that we would die soon, and that it would be a waste of food. I can't go on. I gave him what was left of my soup, but my heart was heavy. I was aware that I was doing it grudgingly. Just like Rabbi Eliyahu's son, I had not passed the test. So remember when they were on the march, right? Rabbi Eliyahu came looking for his son, and he said this prayer, like praying that he wouldn't make that same choice to abandon his father, but then here he is starting to do that himself. He says over here, right on page 106, that he would be ashamed of himself forever for this. Every day my father was getting weaker. His eyes were watery, his face the color of dead leaves. On the third day after we arrived in Buchenwald, everybody had to go to the showers, even the sick, who were instructed to go last. When we returned from the showers, we had to wait outside a long time. The cleaning of the blocks had not been completed. From afar, I saw my father and ran to meet him. He went by me like a shadow, passing me without stopping, without a glance. I called to him. He did not turn around. I ran after him. Father, where are you running? He looked at me for a moment, and his gaze was distant, otherworldly, the face of a stranger. It lasted only a moment, and then he ran away. Suffering from dysentery, my father was prostrate on his cot, with another 5 sick inmates nearby. I sat next to him, watching him. I no longer dared to believe that he could still elude death. I did all I could to give him hope. All of a sudden he sat up and placed his feverish lips against my ear. Eliezer, I must tell you where I buried the gold and silver, in the cellar, you know. And he began talking, faster and faster, afraid of running out of time before he could tell me everything. I tried to tell him that it was not over yet, that we would be going home together. But he no longer wanted to listen to me. He could no longer listen to me. He was worn out. Saliva mixed with blood was trickling from his lips and his eyes, and he had his eyes closed. He was gasping more than breathing. For a ration of bread, I was able to exchange cots to be next to my father, and when the doctor arrived in the afternoon, I went to tell him that my father was very ill. Bring him here. I explained that he could not stand up, but the doctor would not listen, and so, with great difficulty, I brought my father to him. He stared at him, and then asked, curtly, "What do you want?" "My father is sick," I answered in his place. "Dysentery." "That's not my business. I'm a surgeon. Go on, make room for the others." My protests were in vain. "I can't go on, my son. Take me back to my bunk." I took him back and helped him lie down. He was shivering. "Try to get some sleep, father. Try to fall asleep." His breathing was labored. His eyes were closed. But I was convinced that he was seeing everything, that he was seeing the truth in all things. Another doctor came to the block. My father refused to get up. He knew that it would be of no use. In fact, that doctor had come only to finish off the patients. I listened to him shouting at them that they were lazy good-for-nothings who only wanted to stay in bed. I considered jumping him, strangling him, but I had neither the courage nor the strength. I was riveted to my father's agony. My hands were aching. I was clenching them so hard. To strangle the doctor and the others, to set the whole world on fire. My father's murderers. But even the cry stuck in my throat. On my return from the bread distribution, I found my father crying like a child. "My son, they are beating me." "Who?" I thought he was delirious. "Him, the Frenchman and the Pole, they beat me." One more stab to the heart, one more reason to hate, one less reason to live. "Eliezer, Eliezer, tell them not to beat me. I haven't done anything. Why are they beating me?" I began to insult his neighbors. They mocked me. I promised them bread, soup. They laughed. Then they got angry. They could not stand my father any longer, they said, because he no longer was able to drag himself outside to relieve himself. The following day, he complained that they had taken his ration of bread. "While you were asleep?" "No, I wasn't asleep. They threw themselves on me. They snatched it from me, my bread, and they beat me again. I can't go on, my son. Give me some water." I knew that he must not drink, but he pleaded with me so long that I gave in. Water was the worst poison for him, but what else could I do for him? With or without water, it would be over soon anyway. You at least have pity on me. Have pity on him? I was his only son. A week went by like that. Is this your father? Asked the Blackhall test. Yes. He's very sick. The doctor won't do anything for him. He looked me straight in the eye. The doctor cannot do anything more for him, and neither can you. He placed his big, hairy hand on my shoulder and added, Listen to me, kid. Don't forget that you are in a concentration camp. In this place it is every man for himself, and you cannot think of others, not even your father. In this place there is no such thing as father, brother, friend. Each of us lives and dies alone. Let me give you good advice. Stop giving your ration of bread and soup to your old father. You cannot help him anymore. And you are hurting yourself. In fact, you should be getting his rations. I listened to him without interrupting. He was right, I thought deep down, not daring to admit it to myself. Too late to save your old father, you could have 2 rations of bread, 2 rations of soup. It was only a fraction of a second, but it left me feeling guilty. I ran to get some soup and brought it to my father, but he did not want it. All he wanted was water. Don't drink the water, eat the soup. I'm burning up. Why are you so mean to me, my son? Water. I brought him water. Then I left the block for roll call, but I quickly turned back. I lay down on the upper bunk. The sick were allowed to stay in the block, so I would be sick. I didn't want to leave my father. All around me there was silence now, broken only by moaning. In front of the block the SS were giving orders. An officer passed between the bunks. My father was pleading, My son, water. I'm burning up my insides. Silence over there, barked the officer. Leeser, continued my father, water. The officer came closer and shouted at him to be silent, but my father did not hear. He continued to call me. The officer wielded his club and dealt him a violent blow to the head. I didn't move. I was afraid. My body was afraid of another blow, this time to my head. My father groaned once more. I heard, Eliezer. I could see that he was still breathing, in gasps. I didn't move. When I came down from my bunk after roll call, I could see his lips trembling. He was murmuring something. I remained more than an hour leaning over him, looking at him, etching his bloody, broken face into my mind. Then I had to go to sleep. I climbed into my bunk above my father, who was still alive. The date was January 28, 1945. I woke up at dawn on January 29. On my father's cot, there lay another sick person. They must have taken him away before daybreak and taken him to the crematorium. Perhaps he was still breathing. No prayers were said over his tomb, no candle lit in his memory. His last word had been my name. He had called out to me, and I had not answered. I did not weep, and it pained me that I could not weep, but I was out of tears. And deep inside me, if I could have searched the recesses of my feeble conscience, I might have found something like, free at last. All right, and that is the end of chapter 8.